Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education on Monday, April 22nd, 2019. And Mr. Miller, I believe we have a guest with us to lead us in the pledge.
We do. This is Katherine WalshRyan. She is an honors math person at Jefferson High School. She takes math classes at Jefferson High School. She's also the Jefferson County cross country champion in Science Bowl and an honors choir, and is a member of show choir and is overall an outstanding student at Wildwood. So she will be, this is Katie McGivern, and she'll be giving the pledge today.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mary. And Mr. Fogel, I understand we have a couple April recognitions this evening.
One or two, it's that time of year, so let the show begin. We also have, I've spoken to a couple of groups just throughout the day today who through spring break, et cetera. Some of them are actually preparing for the next step of some of the competitions they've won. They will not be able to join us tonight. I would imagine I'll be surprised a couple times as well, so I apologize in advance if I'm left holding my hat. But clearly we have a lot of the students that we are set to recognize tonight here already, along with their very proud parents, administrators, teachers, and all the folks who've worked so hard to help them be successful. I will start off this evening with our Golden Horseshoe winners. See if I can. Golden Horseshoe? We're calling for Golden Horseshoes.
They're passing it down. You're passing it down the hall.
I'm thinking those are sixth graders. I think there's some movement. All right. We did have a number of Golden Horseshoe winners this year. And by the way, anyone who does not make it to tonight, we are rescheduling for May, which is already booking up fast, which is good because it means we're doing wonderful things. All right, since it doesn't look like the Horseshoe folks are out there, we're going to call Robert Cummings, Washington High School Thespians. Washington High School Thespians. I know these folks are here.
You need some ushers out there.
We need ushers and refreshments and all the rest, but I'm building to it. I think we'll get there, so. I apologize to the board and to our guests this evening. I'm a little seat in my pants tonight, just coming back from vacation, and I'm down to about 60 emails, so we're good. All right, come on in. Thank you. This is Robert Cummings. He's the head of the theater department at Washington High School.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, Lord, they're going to pour in. That's yeah, it could take a while.
Come on up this way.
Yep. Yes, that's right. All right, evening, board members and Dr. Gibson. We kind of started on a journey here. 90 years ago, the International Thespian Society was founded in West Virginia to honor theater students, as an honor society for theater students. It now boasts over 135 current members and has 2.3 million alumni. Some of those alumni include Tom Hanks, Madonna, Kelly Clarkson, Goldie Hawn, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I could go on and on and on, Zoe Kravitz. Anyway, for the first time in the history of Jefferson County schools, a high school has been selected to represent, a high school in this county has been selected to represent the state at the International Thespian Festival. This year, there are only 28 plays that qualified for the select showcase at the International Thespian Festival. So we are one of 28 that made it out of thousands. Thank you. I'm going to have them introduce themselves really quickly. That way they don't realize that I forgot their names.
Elowen Rogers.
Cynthia Jimenez.
Julian Fouts.
Jada King.
Big Silver.
Cord Davis. Janice Alka.
Lillian Bentley.
Here you go.
Jamie Hartman.
Samantha Shipman.
Alexis Woodard.
Lauren.
Okay, so this represents some of the 23 students that will be heading to Lincoln, Nebraska at the end of June. And to let you know what a ensemble piece this is, we did a show called The Shape of the Great by author by the name of Laura Lundgren Smith. And to give you an idea about it, let me see, those of you who received awards for acting at the regional festival, please raise your hand. Regional festival. Oh, you were, yep, you regional? And, okay. So Lexus got Best Actress, and Elowen and Cord got all regional cast. Raise your hands if you got an award for acting at the state festival. Okay. Elowen got Best Actress at the state festival, and Jamie Hartman and Lawrence Fouts were named to the all-state cast as well. So it's an incredible ensemble piece. I want to give a special thank you to Transportation for helping us get to Morgantown, along with the people over at Curriculum and Instruction who were really helpful, and as well Mrs. Marcus. There she is, Mrs. Marcus, who was there pushing and pulling sometime the whole way through, and of course the Board of Education, you, Dr. Gibson, and we look forward to your continued support financially to get us to Lincoln, Nebraska, because it is a vacation mecca and many people are trying to get there. So we look forward to your support, and hopefully in the not too distant future you will be hearing about some fundraising that we're doing, and we are accepting donations.
How much do you have to raise?
A little over 30,000.
So, any contributions made this evening?
I have a hat. Sit around. Okay, oh yes. We had two other people who won awards on the technical end of the show. One of them is our fabulous stage manager, Jada King, who was named Best Stage Manager in the state this year. So she took that home, number one. And this is the first play she ever stage managed. So she jumped into the deep end of the pool really quickly, as many of them have. How many of you had been in a play with me before, or had never been in a play with me before? So first-time players. Okay, good. Then over here, we got my friend Dennis Romero. Dennis came here to the wonderful United States when you were in third grade, about third grade, and his English wasn't. His English wasn't. He entered the playwriting contest, and he took second place with the first play that he's ever written in his life. And we are quite impressed. Also, deciding to really jump into the deep end of the pool, he said, Mr. Cummings, I want to act. I want to do some acting. I said, well, here at the festival, Dennis, there's really only like one thing. They have these new playwrights, and you can maybe read something from that. He says, oh, I'm going to try and do that. I said, okay, whatever, Dennis. So Dennis decided to make his acting debut on the biggest stage of the state at WVU. He went ahead and he made his debut acting on one of the person who won the advanced playwriting. He did her play, and he read it. I forget what the play was called, but Bagavon. And he did a great job playing one of the main characters, the Bagavon, actually, in the play. So he did a great job, so we were very proud and impressed with him, as I'm proud and impressed with all of these lovely people. So thank you very much.
Take a picture with the board, maybe tall folks in the back, small folks kneeling in the front. We're doing this like rec league soccer style.
No boarding, people.
Go in the back, try and squeeze everybody.
No cross-checking, no boarding.
hire our stage manager to help me next month with our recognitions.
We'll hope to see you there.
A little bit that way.
You don't know each other better than that, crowdy.
It'll be tighter than this in the bus to Nebraska. All right, encore on 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, sir.
No worries. Hey, friends, I've got stuff for you. You know what? You want me to give it to you tonight or tomorrow? We'll discuss it in the hallway. Bring it with us.
All right, up next, I'm going to introduce Mr. Shane Price. You may remember him from the feature film Science Fair from National Geographic. He is at it again and has some really exciting success stories to share with us.
I do, thank you. Good evening. It gives me great pleasure to present Mr. Matthew Spiker. Come on up. Matthew is a junior at Jefferson High School. He competed in the county fair, the regional fair, and the state fair, and he's going to be representing Jefferson High School, Jefferson County, the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia, and the state of West Virginia at the 2019 Intel ISEF, the International Science and Engineering Fair, in May in Phoenix, Arizona. And hopefully while there, he will get his share of about $4 million in scholarship money and cash prizes. We would love to.
Behind the mic and tell the board what your project was about. Can you detail your project a little for us?
Sure. So, pretty much, my project was creating a new way to analyze data in a computer by analyzing relationships between adjacent bytes in a file. So, if you don't know what a file is, most file types will have some relationship between some byte and the byte after it, like the length of a file. Length of a song is going to be in multiple bytes, and those bytes all have the same meaning, so they're related in some way. And then you take those relationships and plot it in an image with the bytes, and you'll get different images per different file types. And then from that image, you can identify distinct file types, even if a file is corrupted.
Clearly.
Something every high schooler should know.
Is it a light bulb in a potato? All right, hypothesize on 3. 1, 2, 3. More. Good measure. All right, well done. Thank you. Basketball. While the team comes in, I'll introduce Harpers Ferry Middle School Principal Eric Van Daele. I'll give you those.
All right.
Come on in, come on in.
Greetings, board. It's a rare occasion that Harpers Ferry Middle School gets invited over here to celebrate basketball, but Coach Benjamin and his varsity Lady Tigers made it happen. So I'm extremely proud of them. Was able to catch several of their games. It was thrilling to watch them. They worked together as a team. It was a lot of fun. I could say more, but I'm going to turn it over to Coach Benjamin, and I believe one of his associates is going to actually introduce the team. So.
Thank you, Mr. Van Daele. It's a pleasure to be invited here to speak to y'all tonight. These girls were very dedicated. They played hard. They worked as a team. There were some better teams out there, players, but these girls worked as a unit. They did everything possible, and they pulled through, and they won the championship, beating all the other teams. At this time, I'd like to get my team captain, Michaela Primo. She will call out the names. She's an outstanding player. She led the team in all kind of categories, and everyone surrounded her and played hard. Thank you very much.
Faith Clark. Kayla Busby. Shelby Harris. Caitlin Catwinkle. Anna Royster. Jasmine Taylor.
Yourself, Michaela Primo.
Brianna Civil.
She's not here. All right, that was Hope Klein. She was unable to attend tonight.
Ashley Kerr.
She's not here tonight either. All right.
Hope Gestel.
And last was Olivia Hendrick. She cannot make it here tonight, too. We appreciate it and thank you for inviting us and for outstanding year. Good job, ladies.
We'll get a team picture, Coach.
I have to let you girls know I'm extremely excited and happy for you, but signing each one of those certificates stung just a little bit because it was my daughter that you beat in the championship.
That's Mrs. Skinner. Go Tigers on 3. All right, one more. All right, anyone in the audience? Well done. Have a good night. Thank you all for coming out.
Mr. Van Dale, somebody's calling me.
What's that?
Somebody's calling me.
Oh, okay. You got him?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, sir. Yep. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you. Oh, sure. Thanks for being here. It means a lot. Spirit of Jefferson. All right, up next, we've got a twofer for Jefferson High School now for our Spirit of Jefferson Awards. So I'll bring up Principal Sherry Fitzgerald.
1, 2, 3, 4. I lost the thumb war. Oh, good evening, Sherry Fitzgerald from Jefferson High School. I'm pleased to introduce Margaret, or otherwise known as Midge Hart. She has, I'm going to share the words that her nominator, I think that's what you call them, shared with her. So Jen Parker is here this evening to show her support as well. So Jen says that Ms. Hart has worked with me for several years at Jefferson High School. She is an outstanding teacher's aide who is all about the students. She is my right hand in the classroom. She is professional and the person I go to when I need an opinion on how to best serve our students. I have worked with Midge for over 10 years. Her commitment to the students is stronger today than ever. Her passion to help the students, even taking home their clothes to wash, goes above and beyond. She is funny and has a way of making everyone laugh. Together we celebrate every student's birthday and are a true team. We try to make school a place where students feel safe and want to be there. She makes coming to work seem like home for me and the students. And it gives me great pleasure, Mrs. Hart.
She also has a fantastic New York accent.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Sure.
You stand right there between Mrs. Skinner and Mrs. Roper.
Oh, thank you. Should I open it?
You can.
Just don't drop the check.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even know that.
All right, 1, 2, 3. One more. Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'd also be very pleased to introduce Laura Carter. So she's been nominated by one of her colleagues, and the words of her colleague echo throughout all the other colleagues that I know of who work closely with Laura, and myself as well. Laura goes above and beyond every expectation imaginable as an educator. Laura serves on several committees and always puts the utmost energy and thought into developing programs and supports that make other teachers' lives easier and are for the betterment of our students. She is a caring individual who works long hours to develop unique learning experiences for her students and mentor other teachers in lesson development as well as content. She is a fantastic leader, and if she is involved, you know there will be nothing but quality associated with it. Laura gives her all for her students and colleagues, and it is a joy and a privilege to work with her. And I'm glad to say that as well. Whenever I talk with Laura, I never know if I'm going to get a really big philosophical thought or a really tiny quantum physics type of an idea. So my head goes like that most every time I speak to Laura, but I've learned to kind of keep up. So Laura, it gives me great pleasure. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And she has fantastic English accent.
Yes. We're a land of accents.
Oh no, is this the wrong person? I'm sorry.
No, this is the wrong person. Give it to the right person.
If I can say something, they both make my job a little bit easier. I'm here to help, just to recognize them because I oversee the science department and the special ed department, and they make things a lot easier for me also.
Thank you. That's great.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Sandy Poole.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. I didn't see Deborah Corbett hiding in the audience. But she will introduce our volunteer of the month. As everyone knows, volunteers are incredibly important to the work that our teachers do and helping our students thrive. So, Deborah Corbett, Principal, Ransom Elementary.
Good evening. We can never get enough volunteers, and when we're so delighted to recognize one of our volunteers that has been with us, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the things she does. Sandy Poole from Allstate Insurance from West Virginia and Maryland. She's been our business partner and volunteer for almost 10 years. She volunteers her time, her resources, and her energy to provide for all of our students and our families. And here are just some of the examples that she helps us with. She attends our monthly business partner meetings, which comes in about 7:30 in the morning. She dines with our super lunch students and provides prizes. And when she comes, she just doesn't take one shift, she takes all the shifts.
I don't eat 4 times. I eat my salad, then the main meal, then
She does. She spreads it out. Every winter, she has provided hundreds of hats, gloves, and coats to the students. Christmas time, she adopts the families to ensure that they have a nice holiday. She also volunteers her time and support during our fundraisers and our back-to-school events. Every kindergarten student receives a handmade toy during the holidays. She provides grant opportunities which help us provide field trips that we sponsor for our students. Yearly, Sandy donates school supplies and has assisted in our RIF program, and she reads to the classes. Sandy has provided our core shirts for their performance for over the past 5 years. Recently, just before we were in spring break, she provided all the kindergarten students with a golden dollar coin in the Easter eggs. She does so much for us. We don't know what we do without her. She is truly a volunteer that we want to support and commend for all of her work. We just can't express the gratitude that we feel and the impact that you have, Sandy, on all of us. And we want to take time today to thank you very much for all of your work.
rockets on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So that's our monthly recognition spring break edition, and we'll be back in May with more. Thank you.
Thank you. Really quick. A bunch of more here. Wait on the computer.
Spoke too soon. Math field day.
Okay.
Come on in, everybody. They were stuck behind the
signing those, and I was like, I signed a lot more than that, I know.
They were between cyber defense and a golden horseshoe. I knew there was something more than that. Tara, do you want to come up and introduce everybody? Talk about Math Field Day?
Good evening, everyone. So Math Field Day, I understand these are our regional competition winners, and we have 2 of our students here today. I'm not quite sure who.
I'll dig through those.
Okay.
You do your thing, I'll find the right one.
Okay. So Math Field Day is a competition of students who excel in mathematics achievement, and we started with a county competition with grades 4 through 12, and also 9th, 10th, and 12th graders, they compete as a team. So once you advance from the county, you go to the regional competition, and that was held in, where was that held at? Kaiser, so Potomac State College this year. And so once you compete, you compete with the Region 8 counties, and that is Hampshire County, Berkeley County, oh my goodness, Morgan, Hardy, and Mineral. And I know I'm missing some. Grant, thank you. And Jefferson, yes, obviously Jefferson. So we're here tonight to recognize 2 of our winners from our regional state competition in the state, which they qualified to attend the state competition, which is coming up this weekend, April 27th. So we have tonight with us Mason Meager. Congratulations. And Emilio Perez Diggs. Did I say that right? Awesome. Congratulations. Thank you.
Well done, gentlemen. And we had many more winners you can see on Facebook. We got all of them up and recognized. So if you gentlemen will go over with the board, we'll get a picture. I found out which one we're missing. It all adds up. Get it? Math? You know the jokes, folks. All right, 1, 2, 3. One more. Okay.
Nice job, you guys.
And last but not least, Jefferson High School students took first place in the state Cyber Patriot National Youth Cyber Defense Competition. We're going to recognize them this evening. Matthew Spiker and John Delaney. And can you tell us a little bit about cyber defense? It's more than just ads you see on TV.
Yeah,
Come on behind the microphone here so they can get it for the video.
Our mentor, Mr. Glenn, couldn't be here today. He said he couldn't be here, but I'll describe it anyway. The Cyber Patriot competition is a competition whereby students learn cybersecurity on various kinds of computer systems by competing in the competition. Students get images for different operating systems, and there's built-in security flaws in the system, and you have to find those and fix it. And the computer will detect when it's fixed and give you points. And that's the competition part of it. You compete with other teams over a weekend in real time. The team sizes typically go from like 2 to 6 people, with 2 being the absolute minimum. 6 is kind of typical, so there wasn't a whole lot to work with, but we managed to get it done. We managed to get it done. You get a 6-hour period to work on all of the images. There's starting out with like 2 Windows and Linux, and then it comes to like Windows Server and then Windows Desktop and Linux Server, and there's different kinds of tests. So it's a lot to get done in 6 hours. We did not get it all done, but we still managed to win the state competition, and it was a lot of fun in the way. And lots of pizza.
Now, do you go any place from here since winning the state, or is so far is that the top of the competition at this point?
That's the top of it for us, right?
You can go further. Okay, so this is something to explain, but there's a different levels in the competition. We did not score high enough to go into the national competition, but there is one if you score high enough. You can go to the national competition and compete. Actually, in a national competition.
Yes, there is a national competition.
We did not score high enough for that, but we were scoring high enough to place in our state.
Absolutely. So,
Now
we
you
did
were
something
right.
right.
You did. Setting the bar high. Good job.
All right, run, DOS, run, O's free. Give you an idea where I am. Okay, one more.
Floppy disk.
There you go. Thank you, gentlemen.
Great job,
Thank you.
Charlie. I had to know our cybersecurity's in there.
And for real this time, that concludes our presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, you guys.
All right. Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments this evening?
I think there have been a great deal of public comment about Jefferson County schools lately, and I think the only thing that I could add to it was those results speak for themselves. That's all I would say.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, ma'am.
All right, the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the Jefferson County Board of Education regular meeting held April 8th, 2019, and special board meetings held April 9th, 11th, and 16th, 2019?
So moved.
Second? Any questions or changes? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. Citizens' comments. Ms. Ogden, would you put a timer? Just to remind everybody that we are limited to the 3 minutes, if you wouldn't mind. First up, we have Ruth Hatcher, followed by Grant Perlman. Ms. Hatcher?
I think she's out here.
And on deck.
We should paint a circle out there.
Exactly, exactly.
On deck, you can give you. No, we don't want anyone in this crowd with bats.
Sorry, it's the season.
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry, I was outside.
That's okay. I just hope you heard please limit it to 3 minutes if you
Oh,
wouldn't
this
mind.
is going to be quicker than that.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say thank you for the Regional Student Support Center. I just wanted to, I think it's long past due, and it's very much appreciated, and I just want to say thank you for that. And I just also want to say remind you of the Health Symposium that's going to be coming up next Saturday at the Clarion, the old Cliffside, inn. So I hope that you get a chance to attend. Should be very informative, and it looks like there's a lot of great speakers there. So a lot of information should be dispersed from very qualified people. And just want to say, I think when things happen in life, and there's good things and bad things, but I can say for sure that this is, the Student Center would be a very good thing without hesitation for everyone involved in this county, and not only for the people who are in this room right now, but for when we're long gone from this earth, it will be good for the children and the community after us. And that's something that I can totally support 100%, and I'm just 100% behind what you guys have done. And I just want to say a big thank you. Thank you.
And after Grant, we have Katherine Joswick.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Gibson. I'm Grant Perlman. I'm still a teacher at Washington High School. I had 3 very short points to make this evening, and I've shuffled with the order as I sat there. So let me start with more directly in line with what I currently do, which is teach. And you're all probably aware that on May 20th, there will be a special session beginning of the legislature. Let the fun begin. I would just let you know that from everything we're hearing, SB 451 is coming back in some modified but nonetheless ominous form, as we used to call that bill. So please stay tuned, and let's all remember some of the things that concerned us with that piece of legislation and respond to those things, to the legislature. The second was that I'm very excited in terms of the Student Support Center for a number of reasons. One, the ideas that people have already put out, but I know that this is a process which you all will make very inclusive in terms of people's ideas in the whole community. That process of bringing the community's ideas in, thinking about those, some will work, some may not, but that is a very healthy process. It's good for everybody, and you'll get a wonderful facility with some of the things that people bring. And not surprisingly, I'd like to make a suggestion while I have the floor for a moment, which is I am a longtime big fan of VOTEC. I love Rumsey. It's not big enough. We need that kind of VOTEC as also part of the thinking in a regional level. And think of all the students that you've known. I can think of many who've come out of Rumsey as skilled postgraduate students and become entrepreneurs, become professionals in whatever field they chose. So all of this is very good, very positive, and I think you're going to get a lot of community support. And the third thing, I saved it because it's the schmaltz piece. You all know you voted on the consent agenda item that I'm retiring at the end of this year. I've taught 15 years. I have a career path which looked like this until 15 years ago when I got into teaching. And I've actually come full circle. I started teaching with Ms. Marcus at Shepherdstown Middle. I'm finishing up at Washington High School. That's been something I would say is fortunate in terms of my teaching and my time in Jefferson County. But I wanted to thank the board, current and past boards, Dr. Gibson, for an opportunity to work with some of the finest young people I've ever known. Sorry. And I feel really fortunate when I see some of these folks now, I've been doing it 15 years, who are amazing adults. And our community created that. And I've been very lucky, and I thank you.
And after Katherine, we have Katherine WalshRyan.
I'll also be quick, I think, and good job on my name. Your education shows. Just sound it out. Anyway, like the other 2 speakers, I'd also like to thank you for the idea of the Student Center. And this is not a knock on you guys, but it's been a long time since I've been excited about anything in the education world. After coming from Montgomery County with friends in Fairfax County, I didn't really expect you to be able to live up to what I've come to expect from those school districts. But I think that this student center is just a brilliant idea. And to make it a regional student center is an even better idea. I, like Grant, would like to make my plug, not for vocational education, which I think is important, but as a scientist, I hope that you will include some of the STEM facilities or gifted and talented sort of programs in that as well. And so thank you very much for that commitment and the farsightedness for that sort of plan. Unfortunately, my kid's going into middle school. I'm not sure it'll even be operational before he graduates, but I think it's a great thing for our county. Like Ruth mentioned, I also would encourage you to go to the Air Quality Symposium on the 27th. There are a lot of top-notch scientists from institutions throughout the United States. None of them have any dog in the fight with rock wool. So you will get unbiased information on the latest research, especially how air quality affects children. So I hope that all of you can go. You get a free lunch, you know. It's close at the Harpers Ferry Clarion. Again, thank you for the Student Center, and hope to see you Saturday.
Katherine WalshRyan. Is there anybody in the hallway?
We'll call, see if she's out here.
And after Katherine is Sean Amos.
Not here.
Okay.
Good evening, Board. I want to add my voice to those who have come here tonight to thank you guys. I said at a very different meeting not too long ago that societies are judged by how they treat the most vulnerable among them. And we come here to these meetings and we see these kids get up here. And it's, I've spent the last 6 nights in church just because it's Holy Week and that's what I do. And you come out of there feeling a certain way. And when I come to these meetings and I see these kids, it just makes you really, really, really hopeful for the future. And you see, you see the geeky ones and you see, the really smart ones and you see the ones that are talented and they excel in this, that, and the other thing. And then not long ago, I learned that we actually have to bus some of our kids out of the county. Some of the most vulnerable of our students had to be bused out of this county for a lot of years, right? I mean, like more than a decade, apparently. The ones that we really should be looking out for. I love celebrating the smart ones. I love celebrating the talented ones. But it sounds like to me what you guys have done has really stepped up to the plate for the kids who need it most. And so whatever kind of backlash there might be, you guys have done the right thing. We will all stand before a judge one day. I believe that. I believe that everybody in this room will stand before a judge. And that judge will say, when did you do this to me? When did you feed me or clothe me or take care of me? And that judge will say, as much as you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. So whatever else somebody wants to say about how all of this has played out, I just want to tell you how full of hope I am today, how much I appreciate the fact that you guys dealt with this the way that you did, that you're looking out for the least of these. As a taxpayer who does not have children, I am proud to have the majority of my tax dollars go to looking out for the least of these. And for those of you that had the foresight, the intelligence, the wisdom, the self-restraint and control in the heat of the moment, I know things are hot. We've read the things in the paper. We are behind you 100%. God bless every one of you. When you stand before that throne, he will say to you, as much as you did it to the least of these, you did it unto me. So I thank you tonight for what you've done, not just for the smart and the talented, but for the ones who really need our help. Thank you so much, Board. I'm really proud of you all.
Consent agenda.
There are a few changes on there that are marked 137, 138, and 143 are all converted from RIFs into transfers, and 144, that RIF has been rescinded in full.
Madam President, can I make a motion that we move the consent agenda to towards the end when we do we have new positions, consent agenda, and then we also have the reorg discussion. And a lot of those things go together. And so I would like to make a motion that we move those all together, and then also ask if we could have
have an executive session to discuss some personnel issues first, and then come back in and discuss all of this stuff, obviously, in public session.
Okay. Are you talking about the whole consent agenda, or are you talking about number 7, the HR piece of it?
There's several pieces on there. So I just figured we would just do it all at the same time rather than piecemeal it.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. Rather than have to like pick specific numbers.
Okay, so the entire consent agenda. And then A from number 12, unfinished business, the discussion and possible action on the reorg. And also B, under 13, new business, the action on approval of new positions.
Yeah, even if we can move it to after our budget presentation, do that, and then come back, we'll discuss all of that reorg, and then we should be done.
Well, can I have a motion to move those 3 items to after the executive session and after the student expulsion, because we should do that first, as we'll have people waiting. So do I have a motion to move those 3 items to later on the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right. All in favor of moving those 3 items to later in the agenda?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So then we will circle back to, we moved unfinished business, so new business, a fiscal year draft budget presentation. Did I miss something?
The leave of educational value is not under the consent agenda.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay.
All right, so on number 11, do we have a motion on action on approval of the leave of educational value?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion?
Yes. I was wondering if the number of days that I counted up was 6 days.
Cumulative, over the year, cumulative, was over 10 days cumulative. There were 2 other leaves that came before that that didn't require board approval, but now this would be a cumulative over 10 days.
I guess I'm not understanding. So a student has to get board approval if they,
Beyond 10 days for educational leave, right?
okay, so how many days total is it?
I think this would be like total of 15 for this year. They were right about at 10 or so, and this was gonna put them over the 10, so the principal submitted it to the board.
Is there an opinion on,
Principal
are they
approved
doing
it.
the,
Principal approved it, and it was gonna, I mean, they appear to be good students, they're gonna come back and do PowerPoint presentations for the other students, so that, no concern, probably wouldn't
No
bring it to the
concern.
board if we didn't wanna.
Any other questions? All in favor of approving the educational leave?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Now we'll move on to number 13A, the fiscal year 20 draft budget presentation. Ms. Moreau.
This is the same one as F. I'm not sure if I put it on there twice or not, but, just so you know.
Well, would you like to go as A or F?
A.
Okay.
I have a feeling it ended up being me that put it on there twice. I'm just not sure how tonight. So, good evening, Madam President, board members, Superintendent. Tonight we are here to talk about the proposed budget for next year. And, oh, there we go. So, within a school budget, we have multiple funds. Fund 11 is what we refer to as our general expense, current expense, or our operating budget. Fund 61 are our special revenue funds, are federal funds and state funds that are supplemental to the general fund. It is where our special education federal funds and our title programs reside, in addition to our vocational programs. Fund 21 is our debt service fund. Currently, we have a bond in our debt service, and we also have a lease revenue bond for the renovation of our transportation facility. It has a longer name, but it's basically our transportation facility. Fund 51 is our capital projects fund. Tonight we're going to focus on the general operating budget. Fund 61, Fund 21, and Fund 51 are self-balancing accounts, which means that the revenue will equal the expenses. Fund 11 is our operating expense and what we will be working with this evening. Before we go there, our fiscal year 20 draft budget. This is a draft, and the second board meeting in May, we will adopt or ask the board to adopt the final budget pending state approval. Our special revenue fund this year is at almost 13.3 million. Fund 21 as our debt service at 2.7 million, and our capital project funds is where our supplemental revenue sources reside, and I've laid those out with projected balances and drawdowns, and our impact fees. The one note is our table referendum funds. It transfers 1.9 million annually into our general budget to cover or help us assist with capital improvements. This year we'll be reducing it by $100,000 because our commitments are exceeding our collections, or they're very close. So over the next 3 years, we will try to bring that referendum funds to about 1.6 million. Any questions on those funds before we move into general operating?
Yes, the 100,000 that we're holding over, will those go to things like our improvements for our athletic fields and things like that, or what is it targeted towards?
It supplements our general fund for things that have greater than 1 year use and typically over $5,000. So it ranges from transportation to maintenance to technology for eligible expenditures to supplement the budgets in those areas, and also some for labs, computer labs, and things of that nature.
Do we have a budget area where we can start putting money away for our athletic fields, and so we don't go through what we just went through?
Excellent. It's an excellent suggestion. I will tell you that currently this budget does not include it. I think it's a good recommendation. I would love to set aside something for that exactly, particularly since we are replacing things that we know right now in 10 years we're going to need to replace again. This draft budget does not allocate that line item.
So how do we get things on as a new member? How do we get our suggestions on the budget?
In the budget?
Yes. In the budget.
I think that when we go through this, I'm certain that Dr. Gibson, it sounds like she's got the pen and the paper, that if you direct that, then what will need to happen, we would need to reduce something in order to add something. So if that is a priority of the board, then we as a leadership team would look at that as a priority, and when we come back for the second approval, for the final approval in May, I'll have a list of what those changes are and what we decreased in order to add those things to the budget. That good?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Does the board have some idea of, because we can do estimates on athletic facilities and put them on a replacement schedule the same way we have roofs or vehicles. We do a spreadsheet that says, here's like end of life and when you should replace it. do you want us to sort of spec out that if we were to replace everything on that schedule, how much it would cost? Or is that what you're looking for?
We need to look at replacement of 10 years on the fields and the tracks, both tracks.
Okay, when you're just talking about high schools, we have middle schools, we have, like,
I think the
how
best
broad
way-
do you want this? And I'm just saying, because I need to, if we're gonna do this work before we come back and give you a decent estimate, I need to understand what you want it to encompass.
Can we have the athletic directors in every school do that work to give us some perspective on?
Well, they've already created, and we had them 2 years ago, create a spreadsheet of all indoor and outdoor facility needs, costs, and it is tens of millions of dollars for like everything that we have. But we already have, and we did it by school. We've got a huge spreadsheet. This school, these fields, these tracks, these bleachers, these. So.
Can I make, I don't want to oversimplify it, and I absolutely love the idea of capital budgeting. It's near and dear to my heart. In order not to make a lot of work, we already know that that number is going to come out to millions and billions of dollars. It might be a nice step for fiscal year 20 to start with maybe $100,000, setting that aside for those type of improvements, giving us a year to kind of work on those spreadsheets, tie it into your LSIC, but to acknowledge that it is very proactive in planning for that and a really good suggestion without getting overcomplicated and sending us on a lot of, at one time, the table referendum, not that we're there, but if you look at our table referendum funds, you can see that we're only collecting about $2 million a year. At one time, when it first started, we were collecting 4.6 and 4.8, and we did have the idea that a percentage of that would be used to do exactly what you're speaking of. And then we have, it seems like as soon as we get 2 steps ahead, something slides us back. We had our, excess levy decline of 25%, but that maybe instead of trying to do all that work before 1 month, that we could take a year to kind of gather that data, but that we could maybe say $100,000 in this budget might be nice to try to fit in as an ongoing line item to start accumulating those funds for when we need to collaborate or replace things as a priority.
And some of that will be included in the CEFP.
I was
won't
going
it?
to say the CEFP
Right.
will include all of that, as the meeting I went to the other day with the SBA, and in that meeting, they were saying that what we're doing is putting everything in there, and for the entire state, actually, they want to create a capital budget. So that capital budget will be everything they possibly can find and figure in there for every county in the state, and then the larger capital
And then fund
budget.
it?
I'm not sure they really want to see that number because it's going to be a whole lot of money. But at the same time, it will be part of our CEFP process. And both our architects were there with us, and they will be putting in most of the data, and that way it'll be easily tied together.
So I think that makes sense then to approve a certain amount to get started, then we'll have the CEFP done by the end of, or by the summer, end of the year, everything will be approved, the state may or may not step up. But we know we've at least started something.
So, it doesn't sound like 100,000 is enough if we just spent $2 million on 2 different high school fields.
I thought it was $1.5 million. And it's,
on both fields?
On
Both
field,
tracks and
2
one field.
tracks.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so
It's probably not.
100,000 for 10 years,
Yeah.
that's the 2 fields.
And I agree, and so I am happy to do what the board wishes to do. What I will tell you, and I will be completely open and honest, the reason we don't have that line item is because of other competing needs. And so we're at a point in our education, in our school system, where everything that we want, we can have, we just can't have everything. So in order, that line item, we can place in there, but there is going to be an offsetting pain that we have to decrease. So whatever that number is, just know that there will be very difficult choices, and maybe some that our leadership team can't make alone, because they'll be difficult. But yes, whatever number you throw out there, we will work very much to embed that into the final budget.
And can we see what some of those those choices are?
Right.
So that
I think that was the thing, is that you give us a dollar amount, we'll come back to you with our best estimates about what could achieve that, and you guys can approve or say, no, I don't, these aren't the things I want you to cut. Here's where I think it makes more sense, or it was more acceptable to me as a board that you cut.
And some of them, as we go through the presentation, it may become a clearer picture for where we are as a whole, and how you can maybe say, well, maybe not that choice, maybe, you know.
So you're bringing the suggestions from table referendum and board designated, I mean, all of 51, or what will your suggestions be from?
Well, those funds, so your table referendum are already committed. There's no excess funds that we can allocate towards that. As far as board designated, if you look at this particular thing, our drawdowns just to make our 20 budget, it will be 3.1 million. That will leave 1.5 million in our board designated, which is concerning given the fact that this year the budget balance 20, we're at 3.1 million. And next year, with no revenue changes and no expense cuts, theoretically we would need 3.1 million to balance 21. That's where those challenges come in. And so there's not excess funds. We've got to then look at our general operating budget and say, is there something that we can cut from our general funds, or are there expenses that we can take and shift to our special revenue funds, which this budget for 20 does a lot of, where we can free up those funds to make those commitments, Ms. Roper? Okay, so our general current budget is going to be $105.1 million proposed for fiscal year 20. I got some notes. How did we get there? Well, this is our budget baseline. That is a terminology that Dr. Gibson brought when she came, and I like it. It says, here's where our base is. I like to refer to the line that says revenue gap. And as we look at this document, I want to bring to the board's attention the revenue and the expense line items. And just as you pan across it from fiscal year 14 to our proposed budget of this year, when I look across that, I think, wow, we had a pretty big jump in a couple of those years, which I know when I look at it were from a pay increase. So when you see that jump in a pay, that couple $1 million jump in expenses and revenue, we had a pay increase. And between 17 and 18, you see a $10 million jump, but that's our unfunded retirement. If you look at our adopted budget in 19, we had a 5% increase, and we also had an increase in our revenue gap of about $558,000. That's not bad. That's a pretty good job. If you look at our 19 to our 20, we're having the same 5% increase, which is 80 to 83% of our budget, and we're seeing a 1.4 million increase. That's okay, but not as good as what we did the year before. And I just want you guys to pay attention to that as we go through this data and understand this is financial data, and our story should line up with our data.
And Beth, part of that, when you say that 5% increase from 18 to 19, when the state gave that 5% raise to the staff, we had to come up as a county with, what was it, $750,000?
I think it was around 693, or roughly for every 1% increase, you want to make sure that in your head you have about 125,000 locally that ties back to your excess levy to support those raises. Okay. Because the state will fund your service who are within the formula, and we are 100 and some over the formula, at their FTEs, and then they will only fund your professional positions at a 200 day. So, yes.
Okay.
So every time we vote to increase somebody's contract over 200 days, we know the state is not gonna cover any of that. and that
On the
falls budget.
professionals, that is true, and on the service, that is also true, because our excess levy is already covering as much of that as what we can possibly have, which ties back to our March 25th meeting and this next slide, which is where I say this is where we started. So right now, today, even though our excess levy has grown very healthy over the past 5 years, we are still not at the same amount of collections as what we were in fiscal year 10, and it was actually fiscal year 09, when our economic decline hit. When it was in full force, we were down 25% and probably about 5.3 million. And I do want you to keep that in mind as we go into the budget cycle and as we think about these choices and what's our highest priorities. Because yes, if you're already 2 million behind from fiscal year 10, anything that you do, including your pay increases and your step increases. So when I refer to a step increase, every year that you teach or provide a service at the school system, you get to step up. That is roughly, well, it's not roughly, it's exactly $550 for a professional at a 200-day contract. If your contract is an extended contract, for example, if you're working year-round on a 261 day, that $550 will cost the school system $587. I think that's the right number, but it's $550 divided by 200 and times it by 261. The same on the service side.
But doesn't the state reimburse us for a percentage of that, even the step up?
They do. They do for only the people in the formula. So meaning that if you have 156 people on over the formula, we still have to cover that for 156, approximately 109 service position. Am I boring ever?
These numbers are fun, really.
109 service, 30-some professionals that are in the formula, and then another 20 or 30 that aren't even eligible for the formula, for example, myself. So my whole salary is covered by the excess levy because we don't get reimbursed at all.
They don't think that we need a treasurer.
They require you to have a treasurer, just like they're probably gonna require you to get all that data for how much we need for facilities. They require you to have my position, but they do not fund it. Oh, and actually, I will say this. Remember when you nominated me to be the treasurer this year? Technically, when school systems were smaller and in West Virginia, I guess the sheriff was your treasurer, and you would consult him for those services. We're over $105 million now, and it would be almost impossible, I think, to not have a full-time person here.
So we don't have to hire a treasurer in-house, but we just have to have one on call.
Right. Wow. Right. I know.
Somehow make sure
Identified.
we don't screw up $105 million. No pressure. Yeah, no pressure.
So, as I lead into this budget and we say, okay, our excess levy is still not at the fiscal year 10 amounts, I will remind you our student enrollment for the first time, back to back. Prior to fiscal year 19, I believe there was a trend, and that was every 3 years, for some reason, we grew very little, or we had a negative growth, 12, 15, and 18. Fiscal year 19, we had back-to-back non-growth at a loss of 168 students, head count. Although our staffing grew. Our staffing is growing in this projected budget, and first of all, I just say this is data. And everything that we need in a budget is valuable and needed. But we are growing 9.22 positions this year in this projected budget, and last year we grew by 19.91. So we lost 168 students, and we have grown 29.13 positions overall in the past 2 years, which is still okay. Sometimes in a really large system it takes a while to catch up to how that swing is going to occur. Our fund balance looks really good, and when we finished out our fiscal year 18, Our fund balance finished out at 5.6 million. Fund balance is the difference between what you project with revenue and expenses, and basically is kind of like your savings account. Now, as a footnote, I've put down here, a lot of that growth came because in fiscal year 15, our Medicaid was revamped completely at the state level, and it took this long, almost 4 years, for them to catch it up and that system to start working. Of that 5.6 million, we had previous commitments that totaled 833, leaving us with 4.8 in unassigned carryover. That carryover was then reduced by about 900,000 for current commitments in our system. And if you recall, we did not do capital improvements, but we did with that carryover fund high priority projects this year. First time we've done that since I've been here in 15 years. We said there are certain projects that we know if we dip down in our revenue or we cut our expenses, we want to make sure we have 3 years to cover those projects and give us time as a system to acclimate to whether or not we want to reduce it before it impacts staff or services.
Could you share what those projects are?
I can. I think I did bring a copy of it. The volunteer program for Employee of the Month, Volunteer of the Month, and Professional in Service was one of those projects. We currently have a United Way Mental Health County match for Wildwood Middle School. Anybody know?
Wildwood, yes, ma'am.
Wildwood Middle School, we felt that we needed to fund that and make sure that we had enough money to go 2 years. Teacher Service of the Year annually, that's a recognized program within Jefferson County, and then although Mr. Daughtery, the sheriff, funds that as a contribution donation to our school system annually, we felt like if he had a bad year, we would still want to make sure that that program continued on for 3 years. National competitions, co-curricular capital needs, those kids that were here tonight that are going to go on to an additional level, we have a policy that funds certain criteria that they can access those funds. Co-curricular capital needs kind of works with our band uniforms in some degree, not facilities, but there are some co-curricular needs that we have, sometimes instruments in the band level. I can't think of anything
We
else.
did cafeteria equipment.
Yes.
We went in half with Jefferson High School on getting new cafeteria tables, large scale lockers, things like that.
We did both special ed equipment and child nutrition equipment. So those are kind of capital needs, and it's the first time that we've done that. We funded those at $50,000. Now I will tell you, I'm going to be going back to both of those programs and saying, hey, you have a $50,000. Is this in your general fund too? Can we cut a little bit? And that is probably one of the most challenging things, is making sure that we don't duplicate when we make these type of changes. We did central office automation. So at the time that we came for the carryover approval, that's $25,000 that we funded. For some of the automation that saves additional resources on the staffing end, we felt it was important to make sure that we continue to fund that on an annual basis. And that's it. So that was a total of, I don't know, 10 or 12 projects that equaled $83,000 annually. That $83,000 is not in the fiscal year 20 budget, because when we had to start making cuts, we dropped in the amounts for 3 years, but that has still not made it. So if we're going to want to make that, we would need to cut something else at this point.
So, question.
Okay.
The Spirit Awards, that comes out of that?
Yes.
Okay. And you said the Teacher of the Year, but Mr. Daugherty is paying for it now, so we haven't had to pay for it yet.
We haven't. We actually have a balance in there of $7,500, and and when Mr. Daugherty contributes to it, it will continue with that balance. So the way it was done is there is an annual contribution with a maximum amount in that account of $7,500.
Okay, so.
And I
then-
could give you a copy of this, it came.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
helpful.
I can email that to you, or it was, I'll just email it to you.
Okay.
But there was an annual contribution that we came for at that time with a maximum balance. And the thought was, okay, we dump the maximum balance in there, and then annually, kind of like what you're saying for the facilities, we're gonna annually make that contribution in our operating budget every year, which we did this year,
So,
at this point.
okay, and I just lost my thought.
Sorry.
The automation,
Mhm.
the 25,000, was that the startup or is that
That was
every
the
year?
maximum balance, and the annual contribution was to be 5,000.
Okay, so then we won't have, that's 20,000 saved.
You know, you actually have a maximum balance sitting there of 25,000 right now, and then we didn't contribute the 5,000 that we were going to. But yes, the maximum balance would be 25,000. All right, revenue. I did want to talk a little bit longer about revenue than I normally do because it's there's so much going on in our revenue right now. I want to make sure that you understand. Our taxes look good, they're growing. The regular taxes are an inverse relationship basically for the formula. Our excess levy, again, it's growing, it grew overall 3%. I think assessed values grew 4.7. That's helping us get back to where we were in 2010. Investment earnings are up. I mean, we're going from less than 0.5% up to, I think we're at 2% in some of our earnings. Miscellaneous, our E-rate, just note, E-rate, we used to be reimbursed for cell phones. That was phased out, the last year just phased out, and so there's a decline in that revenue source. It's small, but still $30,000.
Are we on page 9? Are you?
I have it
Okay, this is-
as page 12. It's revenue budget comparison. Kind of just going down and highlighting the differences.
Mine's 9.
Yours 9, okay.
Okay, I didn't renumber mine, sorry about that. State aid, I wanna highlight this. It looks like we're growing by 900,000, but our loss in enrollment, we lost $1.5 million in our state aid. It looks like we're growing because the 5% increase is already in there. So we received an additional $2 million for the people within the formula that they're funding. And I didn't want you to overlook that the loss of student enrollment is a huge impact, not just to your general fund, like our, we get funding for alternative risk kids, that's also down. It's the first time in 15 years that I understand a small county's challenge when they lose enrollment, because it impacts so much of your revenue that you don't realize until you get those numbers. Increased enrollment is not budgeted at all in this budget. It's about $250,000 that we depend upon for that enrollment. Retirement is down. The way that the formula works is when your older teachers retire, it helps us with attrition and, salary cost, but it also, they fund us less because the older retirement was funded at 15%. Our newer retirement is only at 7.5%. Our Medicaid is up. So finally, after 4 years, I felt comfortable enough to move our Medicaid line item up to $600,000. We've collected probably between 7 and 9 over the past 3 years, but there's so many variables in there. 600 is the most comfortable that I feel at for fiscal year 20. It's about 145,000 increase on revenue. Referendum fund, which goes into our general funds, down 100,000. Our board designated is up by 1.4 million. Any questions on revenue changes? I think the most important thing for me in revenue and expenses is that when I refer to a revenue gap, ideally for me, current revenue expenses and current revenue received and current expenses would equal. That we wouldn't need a carryover or a board designated to balance that. Salaries. So the biggest increase is in contracted salaries, and when you refer to contracted salaries, sometimes it gets confusing with contracts. But when you hire a regular employee, whether full-time or half-time in a school system, we call that a contract. So your professionals and your service are on a contract. That includes the 5% increase in that, and it also includes a lot of shifting of positions to Fund 61. So we shifted into Step 7 as many positions legally as possible. This year in the formula, the legislative action that the legislators that took action moved mentor funding, which used to reside outside the formula into Step 7D. It brought $175,000 to the school system, which is really good too, because they can't cut that formula without legislative action. So when it used to come in at the end of the year, we would get it, but it was always exposed to cuts. So the fact that they transferred it over, it brought $175,000 this year. I'm not exactly sure how it's being funded, but it will fund our cultural diversity staff development position, and we will still have $80,000 left to collaborate with our Title II funds in providing professional staff development to our employees. The salary supplemental.
Wait. I'm
okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
Of course, they hit me because if I worked as a cultural diversity person all these years, what was used to fund that position when there was a person in that position?
The general fund.
The general fund.
The
okay.
general fund. So it just reduced it in the general fund and picked it up in the special revenue fund. And we did that with many positions to balance this budget this year. I don't want to say it's controversial, but from trying to balance a budget, it is optimal to try to use some of the special revenue funds to fund positions and yet still leave enough for them to do the things that they need to do with those special revenue funds.
So you said it's $175,000.
Approximately.
Right, and so you said cultural diversity and what else?
Just, I call it cultural, for me, the whole title is cultural diversity / staff development. That position that was your.
$175,000?
No, that's what we got for the funding for mentoring, and it's $175, but the position will probably run between 80 and 85 with benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, so once you take, and you add your health insurance and the employer contribution, free dental, free vision, your small life insurance policy, then you have to pay your retirement, you have to match at 7.5. It's not that high, but remember 15% roughly could be benefits.
Okay, and why again is it controversial?
Well, because when I say controversial, I think sometimes we have other needs for those, and shifting positions then eats into those funds.
Right, but if you had a position for 15 years, I'm not quite sure why it's controversial.
Well, it's not controversial for me.
And I think the difference is, Ms. Marone, and if I'm incorrect, please let me know, having sat and had those conversations in JLT, I don't think there's anything controversial about the cultural diversity position. I think her statement is special revenue is often, we're given special revenue for designated purposes. This revenue is just for special education students. This revenue is just for Title I students. And what happens is the programs and the people who are very vested in those want to do certain specialized programs or create these new ideas, do have a lot more flexibility and funding on what they spend as those. And sometimes what we're saying is we're funding these positions through the general revenue that those students benefit from, and you can't keep pushing all of that cost out to the general fund, and we're bearing it, and then you have funding in Title I and special education to do these they're great programs, but they're not required programs. And so sometimes there's that tension between the folks who run those programs who want to do great things for kids, and where we sometimes have to say, we have these positions, and right now we're funding them in the general fund, but your children are benefiting, and we're running out of money here. So we're gonna have to shift these positions over there, and you may not have the same amount of money to run this special summer program that you really think is great for kids, but it's not a requirement, whereas this staff person, this position, is something that we've had and we feel like we need. Does that make sense? Like, those are the discussions that we're having in JLT.
Okay. No, I'm just confused by the revenue that was used for the position, and so you're saying you can only use the $175,000 for certain positions, and so is that why you?
Let me say it in a different way. So, for example, out of this budget, Step 7 has Step 7A, Step 7B, Step 7C, Step 7D. Step 7A is your instructional programs. This year, we shifted from the general fund over to Step 7A, an additional 1.4 positions, which were interventionist. So that freed up from the general fund, approximately $100,000. Well, Step 7A, when I say it's controversial, they already had things they'd like to spend those funds that are needed, that reduces the amount in Step 7A for those expenditures, because we're now funding positions. And I will tell you, this is what we did 3 years ago. What they were funding 3 years ago is the same amount that they're funding this year. Any increases, because the way the formula is built, is if there is an increase, it's in Step 7. So we froze them for 3 years ago. Any of those increases are also now starting to fund positions. For example, Step 7B is technology, and that funding is probably, $700,000 or $800,000. And with the flexibility that the legislators passed a couple years ago, you can use up to 50% of that funding now to fund positions. This year we shifted almost 5 positions. They were our,
It's okay, 5 positions.
Yeah, 5 positions. So they're
50%.
technology related. Some of our academic technology coaches, our internet person, we shifted those over. The people in those offices would like to use those to build our infrastructure for technology. So when I say it's controversial, is they have good needs and they want those needs to go towards those purposes. We're having to shift those in order to bounce that. I mean, we shifted about 6 or 7 positions. Special ed's a good example. Federal special ed gives you $1.3 million. We have been funding 28 aides and then, a secretary. This year we shifted 2 aides and a half-time Medicaid person, into federal special ed.
So will the $175,000 that we're getting, are you saying then CNI can't use that $175,000 for the programs? Is that what
They
you're
can
saying?
use the difference. So they will use the difference for staff development. So you'll fund the position, whatever's after the position, probably $80,000, can then be used to collaborate with Title II to provide staff development to our employees.
But this is money that they hadn't had
Correct.
before.
It's
okay,
new.
so it's not really cutting into what they're used to having.
You're right, it's not, because for some reason, when they shifted it into the formula, however they're calculating it, is 4 or 5 times as much as what you used to get in mentor funding outside the formula. Do you remember? Okay, yeah.
Is there mentor funding?
Is that true? Okay, because it was like 30 or 40,000. Okay.
So mentor funding, will that take? Do we need that to? Don't we need that to for our new teachers?
Well, it's also
Missy,
providing staff development, focusing on improvement of, like, sometimes it's not just a new teacher, sometimes it's a teacher that maybe there's, have some concerns in this area, or there's some new initiative in the social studies area that they want to make sure they understand how to
We
do.
ongoing training all year with the new teachers that's set up to try to have enough less than 3 years' experience, that they seem to have a specific need on something.
So is that money used for like a stipend for a person to sort of have that mentor or mentee?
Terry, you can help me. Some of it goes for substitute costs, because if we try to bring them after school, it's hard to get it.
Professional, yes, leave.
What the legislature did this session, it shifted out, you won't be familiar with this term. That 175 covers the WV SIP. Remember the SIP? They've actually funded it, where before we pulled in different funds to fund the SIP. Now there's an allocation solely for the SIP. And then I, in part of my strategic plan work, have to dole out that 175, which includes the person who's responsible for cultural diversity and professional development oversight.
Federal, so that's federal funds that.
State, but state, for the first time, state funds are included in my federal budget process.
And my guess is because they shifted into the formula and then had specific criteria to use it.
Okay, so we're not in, so he's still doing 100% federal, state, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this budget includes on the salary level attrition. This year we saved about $225,000 just from old teachers retiring, or not just teachers, and new employees roughly.
Mature is the word there.
Mature, sorry. Older teachers.
Experienced.
Listen.
Experienced teachers.
Well, and what I will say is that if you're in the old system too, I mean, one of the benefits to education and public service in an education system is if you start with us as a young student out of college, at 55, you can have a decent retirement, even still today, and another career if you chose to. But what a lot of people don't realize is how much money that savings from the mature employees and the newer and younger employees coming on board. Non-salary expenditures, you can see we're increasing by 1.2, and I think we're going to still be working on that. The primary increases, and there are some decreases in there, are human resources. We've done a lot of automation. That automation comes with an annual recurring cost. Their budget is increasing by $163,000 in fiscal year 20. Instructional resources, we have a new adoption every year. It used to be called our textbook fund. It's now instructional resources, and it does include a lot of technology and some professional development.
How is HR increasing $163,000?
A lot of it is licenses to maintain the automation that we have produced over the past couple years, past 3 years. And so when you automate, there is a recurring cost that is typically associated with that automation. And well, their overall budget is up 163. We're also adding some services. That's the primary reason. I mean, without going down one by one line item, the primary reason, those licenses are about $96,000. Okay. Now, this is a draft. We're still working through some of that. I'm just giving you the highlights of what departments are increasing. Instructional resources, $217,000. Just between last year's budget, this year's budget. I have instruction. Of course, we had ambulance fees and an increase in our EPIC. And the contribution to DHHR, those are about $35,000 new expenditures. Legal, this budget accommodates for about an extra $67,000. Which I think is a conservative number. I'm not sure it will be that high. Maintenance, $435,000. Public information, we have the new thought exchange built into this number, $60,000.
Is that yearly?
Yes, annual. Remember that we didn't really have a budget last year for that department, so it's a new department. And some of that is being offset in other areas, but it's basically an increase. Special education?
I'm sorry.
400,000?
Thought exchange cost 60,000 a year.
No, that's probably 40, maybe data surveying, 35 or 40.
40,000 a year.
Special education, 400,000. Technology's 57. A lot of those are either new programs, upgrades, or licenses. Getting a new postage machine this year. It's been 15 years. That's $8,000. It's a lot, but it'll last another 15 years. Transportation, additional 67,000. And then utilities, which would include gas, data communications, diesel, electricity, heating, all voice services. This year is up 261,000. It also decreases our contingency fund by 100,000 and our reserve by another 300,000. So, other than that, I think it covers everything that we need. As a first proposed draft for fiscal year 20. Any questions?
What did we do with the incentive that we used to have for the attendance incentive?
We decreased it. In 2012, when we risked 66 positions, I believe at that time, we decided to remove it. It cost back then probably about $500,000.
I'm sorry, did you say we ripped 67 positions in 2012?
Yes. Yes. And that's, if you look at our excess levy numbers, you can see that in fiscal year 10, we declined by 761,000 with a 3% decrease. In fiscal year 11, we were hit with almost $3 million, leaving us in fiscal year 12 with another $1 million. With very little change, we had some really tough choices to make. Now, all the positions were riffed. I want to say that every single person was put back to work. The positions were riffed.
Right.
Everyone ended up back. We realigned positions at that time. And at that time, we also cut, I think the attendance bonus was over $500,000. It was one of the cuts that we made in 2012.
And so we put that money where?
We put that money in this $4 million decline in excess levy. We had to cut things in order to make up for the decline in the excess levy because we were receiving $23 million, and by the time fiscal year 12 came, we were only projecting to collect $19 million. So we were down, close to $5 million, $4.5 million. And I think the first 2 years we were thinking that the economy would tick back up and our assessed values would increase quicker than what it rebounded, and I think it didn't. So we cut it permanently with a lot of other things at that time, I think. We made some, I can't remember, I don't know.
We reduced our middle school.
We did, yeah. We did. That was 14 positions. We reduced the second planning period at the middle school level and added the Read 81 program. So I think it, and the child care, yeah, we reduced that. That was probably a couple $100,000. Okay. Any questions?
So, if I'm hearing you correct, in the end, really, you're saying, I guess I have two questions, or two thoughts. One, our goal should be, obviously, to get that $1.9 million as low as we possibly can. Because yes, that may be in the general fund to try to fund the roofs and everything else we need through maintenance or whatever, but, I mean, in reality, we don't know how long we'll have that, and even if we have that, it can be used to fund some of those capital expenditures, but it should not be in the general operating budget.
I think that you could consider that. I think you could certainly consider that as a permanent revenue source. Like instead of, I was thinking over the next 5 years, we would take it down to 1.6. You want to take it down to 1.4, and then anything above 1.4 million collected, that it would go towards capital improvements. You could do that. Now, what that means is there are expenses in that general fund that you have to weigh, you know, looking for creative ways to save money, you know. Are we funding half-time positions? Should we be funding full-time positions? You know, when you grow, it's hard in education because you grow, but you only grow half at an increment. So you hire a half-time person, and then that person sits and that works well, and then you hire, you know, there are just so many things that are just hard choices. They're just hard choices, so yeah, you could do that.
Do you have a suggestion?
No, I don't. My suggestion is that you, whatever you think through. And my experience tells me that there is nothing that isn't valuable and important to somebody that's going to be very passionate about what they're doing. They're just hard choices. Communicate well.
And do you feel like with this legislative session that's going to happen, do you feel like there's any anticipated changes that may help us? I mean, I'm thinking, do we have in this current budget another 5% raise if that comes out?
We do. That is
Okay.
built into this budget. I mean, my understanding is that that is pretty solid. Do you know anything about step 5? Step 5 will help us tremendously.
Step 5 will help us a lot if that step 5, that originally proposed $25 million step 5 increase, which covers nurses, counselors, social workers, psychologists, if that comes through, and we've conveyed to our legislators repeatedly that it's incredibly important, that will help us out tremendously. That hasn't died, it hasn't been pulled. I think it's gonna come down to what they leverage it with. Because there are some things that are not palatable to certain groups.
That's in Senate Bill 451.
It was originally in Senate Bill 451, yes ma'am. Much like the raise though, all of that was in Senate Bill 451 along with the things that people, certain folks couldn't tolerate. So the idea from different sides, some want every single one of those things pulled out singly, and for certain segments of the legislature, they want things tied together to say, if I'm going to give you this, I need to get this. And that's sort of the battle right now of which one of those two methodologies is going to win.
If it passes, I would recommend if we get 4 positions that we shift, like a social work position, anything we can shift will help free up our general fund. And that's where it's difficult because you say nurses and counselors and everybody's like, we need more. And we do. I mean, right now we're being funded at the same level we were funded at 2008. And if you look at our step 5 right now, we're negative 12 positions not being funded. So if that passes, we would fund those 12 positions, and the estimate is that in our county we would have 4. Say fund 2 and take the other 2 and try to shift. You know, those are harder choices, and those are very easy for the data lady to stand up here who doesn't have to be at a school and, you know, deal with the pressures that our guidance counselors and nurses are dealing with, you know. That's why I say it's never easy. On paper it looks really easy. Just hire 2. You don't need 4.
Once again, goes back to we can have anything, just not everything.
Yes, it does. And unfortunately, we've built for many years.
I don't like, but I listen.
Yeah, we've built many years that there's nothing that's an easy choice right now. That there's just not. You know, and it's never an easy choice, but there were some, we've cut all the, I mean, we can still cut some of the non-salary, I'm sure of that, but we've cut a lot. We have cut a lot, and, you know, I know you're gonna deal with the reorganization. I mean, I don't even wanna change. Please don't tell me I have to do anything different. But we ask our teachers to do it every year, and you know, it's new. And so that change is just gonna be difficult because we're asking people to do more with less and less and less, so, anyway.
So how, if we pass the budget tentatively and then they in May 20th go into session, we have the legal right to then change that this year, is that correct? Or you think, cause will they start that fiscal year July 1?
When's our approval isn't till the 27th? Janet, I know I'm looking at you, but 28th is, yeah, so if they actually passed it on the 20th, it would be in the budget that I would ask you to approve, and it would be a nice celebration. I mean, I think it would help us tremendously. It would help our excess levy. At 1.9 million, some of the funding in there, it would help our step fives if we shift that position. I know APs at the elementary level have, Dr. Gibson asks me every year, I say, shift that position. If you really need to get one of those APs hired, that would be, anything you do, if you have an offsetting decline, is always helpful. And there's nothing that I can think of where we're adding that we shouldn't have a corresponding decline when and if possible at this point.
How are our contracted positions affecting our budget? The positions that we had contracted but we need to change over?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I'm gonna answer it and then let the instructional people answer it. From my perspective, it'll put us in legal compliance, but it's going to increase our staffing. So we're already over the formula. Every position that we add, unless funded by our special revenue, which some of them are, puts us in a position to go more over the formula. In addition, it makes it much more difficult to cut those expenses. So when you're contracted, I can say, Arthena, we don't have the money to fund you, sorry, but thank you for everything. When we shift you over as a need in our system, it becomes more personal and less data driven. So it's more difficult now that you're one of us to be able to reduce those positions. That's what RIFs are, and that's, that's how it's impacting us. We are looking at being creative, and Dr. Gibson has come up with some wonderful suggestions with RISA, not only administratively to be less burdensome, but also to still have some flexibility. But ultimately, those positions that get shifted, and we're adding 9.22 without, we're adding those positions, and some of those are stemming from contracted. Some of them are decreased. I mean, our budget would actually, our FTEs would be 11 if we didn't have 2 speech people that are not included in the budget. They shift it to legally being contracted. Never mind.
So we're increasing by 11 just to be in compliance with the IRS?
No. How many positions actually stemmed from the IRS?
So to say, that original list was a little over 400 individual contracted positions that were affected.
Yeah.
But we had a committee who classified each one of those, and what we're, again, it's like, part of what we're attempting to do is what of those can we actually do through a business? That's part of what we're working through with Sherry Barnett and Epic. Which ones of those can we fund through them? Which ones do we have to create positions for, which then leads to benefit costs that we didn't previously have. We're trying to avoid that, I'll be completely honest, because that drives our costs up as well. I don't have that list in front of me. We sent you the original list without the before the committee finished all of their coding and the legal check on it. So I
had to guess 4 or 5 positions, and I'm just going to say the primary big ones are interventionists and academic coaches that were being contracted are now being shifted to full FTEs. If I had to just guess. Lee, would you agree? Or Joseph?
More academic coaches than interventionists because they won't be benefited, but coaches will.
I was going to say also we're looking at the creation of a new type of position or classification that might be part-time as needed type of position as well with no benefits. And the code currently appears to be able to allow us to do that.
Other counties
so we're
do it.
exploring those possibilities as well.
But actual FTEs for maybe 4.
of work went into this. All right, 13C, surplus vehicles.
Hopefully, this is quicker and easier than that. That's very complicated, and she worked very, very hard on it.
Thank you. I've done it before, so I know.
Yeah, it's daunting. And I'll come in a lot of times and then see Beth first thing in the morning or late at night trying to figure this thing out.
I think she can go here half a dozen times on Saturday.
On Saturday, yes. We have 3 trucks from maintenance that we've been trying to keep on the road for years. And these 3 trucks, we just need to put on the surplus list. Well, again, we'll do like we will do with the buses, is put them on public surplus. We'll get the pictures, we'll put them on public surplus. We'll put a link on the webpage. We'll make sure we do everything we can to get as much money as we possibly can for these vehicles. However, all these vehicles are, as they say in the little, I gave you a little sheet from, from Dave. He said, basically, they all don't run, and they all couldn't possibly ever get stickered again, unless you did a whole lot of work to them. So, these are vehicles that we've used and used and used and used. We used them up. One of the questions was about a dump truck. We do have a dump truck on the list, but it's got a crack in the frame. It can't even be welded. One of the things, that's why we don't drive that dump truck, and that's why we bought a dump truck years ago to replace it. We were just using it at Jefferson to push snow. It won't do that anymore either. So for that reason, we were taking it, again, getting rid of it, putting it on public surplus, and having them sell it and get us some money for these vehicles. It may not be a whole lot, but it'll be something. And you might be surprised. Every once in a while, we had the black van over here that didn't run hardly at all, was all kind of problems. We ended up getting $3,500 for it. So it was better than what we ever expected. So again, those are the vehicles, and they just need to be on the surplus list.
And a cube van, is that a box truck?
It's a box van.
Okay.
Yeah, like, it's a big box van.
I've heard of a minivan, but I've never heard of a
No.
cube.
It's just a square van. They're yellow, the ones we have. And this is one of those. Those vans were bought before I took over at maintenance, when I was at maintenance at all. Actually, that one's old enough that I just taken over as principal at the 9th grade complex. So quite old vehicle, and got 188,000 miles on it. And again, it needs an engine. One of those things makes no sense for us to continue like that.
Would it behoove us at all to save that plow to,
It doesn't fit anything else. If it did, we would keep it.
All right. Because I know a couple years ago we had that issue because we have no plows.
Right. And
So what are we gonna do to prepare, say, for this fall, we end up getting snow, and we don't have?
what I have done is, at this moment, there's two trucks in the budget. If the 2 trucks stay in the budget, then we'll be able to work from there.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve to surplus the vehicles number 204, 205, and 206?
So moved.
Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Am I next?
Bids for various services.
I'm next again. And again, what I did was just put some together. Maintenance will be going out for these bids. We'll, of course, try to get the very, very best deal we can. We always bring them to you before we go out to them. We always put them in the newspaper we always try to make sure that people know we're looking for them. And we put them in as a group trying to just be more efficient. Disposal and recycling is one of the bids, which is basically our trash. And every 3 years we go out for a trash bid. Normally we have no more than two people bid on this. Normally it is Waste Management and Republic. And those were the two that bid the last time. We normally take the low bid because both are very good companies and both provide the same kind of service. We were surprised at how expensive Republic was the last time. The time before they were very cheap, and not very cheap, still almost $100,000, but at the same much lower than Waste Management. Then we found out that they said, well, we made a mistake. Well, they lived with the mistake for 3 years, but at the same time, we always try to do our best. Pest management is normal pest management. Again, we go out and try to get the very best deal on under all their specs that we always make sure that we have. Dust mops will be going down, or should be going down, because we had to get part of the IRS audit. We had to take out uniforms for our guys. They would not approve us to buy uniforms for the maintenance staff. So since those uniforms had to come out of there, it should be about $2,364 is what we paid last year for uniforms. So we took that out of the bid. And then there's field maintenance on Jefferson's field of somewhere around $22,000, between $22,000 and $23,000 that we at this time spend to maintain the field at Jefferson. That's also putting on the stripes and things like that to make it more equitable at that point between Jefferson and Washington. That's a company that we've been using. It is a company we've been using for a long time. However, we'll be going out to bid, could change companies. It's possible.
Is Washington on a different schedule?
Washington is a different kind of
Washington has turf, so they don't need
right.
maintenance.
So it's a different kind. We're talking, this is more of somebody, this company that we use, which is Clear Vision right now. They do golf courses and other things where they keep up the turf and like golf courses as well as they possibly can. And they do a great job for us. They've worked very hard, and it's a much better, it's probably 100 times better, I would say, than it was 10 years ago. And we've been doing this for, Mark, 8 or 10 years? It's been quite a while.
Like that, and they've done a great job on it.
And they've done a great job.
And their fields are different from the middle school's fields?
The middle school fields we don't do. We only are doing the high school field.
What, have we gotten any feedback from the AD at Jefferson? Does he have any thoughts on, like, how's that field being maintained? What about the company
He's
used?
very happy. I just talked to him for Thursday, because Friday was Good Friday. Thursday, we walked around and he was talking about how well it was being maintained by Clear Vision. However, always got some problems. You always have issues with a little bit of water, standing water. In the new contract that we are having on replacing the track, we'll also be adding some sod in that area that we're having problems keeping grass to grow. Moving it up a little bit so that we don't get as much water right in there. It should then skate across the track. The water should go across the track, not stay on the football field, which should make the grass grow better.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve going out for bid for waste disposal, recycling, pest control, dust mop cleaning, and Jefferson High School field maintenance?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Any other discussion or questions?
I guess my only other discussion or question would be when we go to bid that since it does affect J-High before it's bid out, does it behoove us to send it to the AD to say, hey, have we included everything that we need to include to make sure
Sure.
that it's done right before we send it out for bid, so that we
Certainly.
can fix it right away, just in
Yep.
case. I mean, I don't
Yep.
know.
There's no
but
problem at all.
obviously they would know.
Like you said, he's very happy with what they were doing so far.
Okay.
It was a hard year this year too, because with all the rain.
Yeah.
Rainiest year ever.
All in favor? Opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Summer programs.
This is simply a notice to the board of all of the current summer programs that we support. And part of it is sort of the notice that of all of these, the special education extended school year program and the transportation associated with that in special education are the only ones that are legally mandated for us. Several of the programs that we run are, once again, they're great for students. We've had much positive feedback and success with them. We've already begun the process of hiring for those. We've had some discussion. One of the things that the board did this year is to deal with the annual process of extended school year. We have to advertise and hire an administrator every year and hire teachers, and it's mandated. So when we brought back to you the coordinator's contract this year, we said, go ahead and build in the days, and then we have a designated administrator of that program that's part of your job. We don't have to worry that someone's not going to want to do that job. So we've been having the same discussion about some of the other summer programs, but some of that's revolved around while we think it is better for our staff for a whole host of reasons, because it is a ridiculous amount of work for finance and HR and instruction, because every year we have to repost all of these jobs for all of these summer programs. We have to rehire everyone, and finance has to manually go through the process of all of those paychecks for the summer. Summers are sort of like downtime if it's not in your regular contract. So it is a tremendous number of man hours for HR, instruction, and finance to do this. But we're hesitant to add those into a contract if they're not permanent, they're not required programs, because as we continue to have to deal with some financial struggles, we want to preserve the board's ability to say, hey, that program's awesome. I'm glad that sixth graders feel a lot more confident coming in because they've been to Taming the Tiger, but we have more pressing needs. So this is just a notice that right now, these are all of the summer programs that we are currently funding, that are currently on slate for this summer, that we've already got rolling. But for your consideration as we go through the budget process, because this budget that you'll approve at the end of May will either have or not next year's summer programs in them, if that makes sense.
We get some dollar amounts on these?
We certainly can. Some of them are variable depending on how many kids qualify.
Right, but I don't need them right now, but it would be nice to know how much these programs are costing us.
So right now, high school, summer school, middle school, summer school, and special ed extended year, are you saying are the only three?
And one of the things that we talked about, and Pat was checking into with the state, the only one that to our knowledge is actually written into the law, thou shalt provide, is extended school year. I don't believe
So when a child
that.
fails, we don't necessarily have to offer credit recovery.
Right. Not mandated to under West Virginia code. Now, certainly the benefit to your graduation rate for that and other, and again,
No, it's good to know.
You'll hear the consistent message over and over again. We can do anything you want, and it is all good for kids. Like, all of it is good for kids, but we can't do everything.
And then with what are we actually mandated to provide transportation for then?
ESY, the mandated program, and for special education students who are in out of state, out of county placements, they have year-round school, so we have to continue to transport them during the summer.
So are you saying then even for those, if it's the same bus driver that's driving, or that bus driver doesn't get to keep that route in the summer, they have to rebid that route?
They have to rebid, although we have a separate, and again, good times, correct me if I say anything incorrectly, there is, you know how there is, particularly for service personnel, there's a seniority list.
Yeah.
There is a separate summer seniority list for those jobs.
So legally, can you go ahead at the beginning of the year and write that to include the summer? And then the person who has the highest seniority gets to bid it and they get a guaranteed job all summer?
Well,
And then doesn't
when
that
you
save us
say
money
they
or no?
get to bid it, what means is you post it out.
Right.
And of the people who have summer seniority, we go through the same process. Do you want this job this year? You're the most senior person on the summer list. Do you want this job?
But
You're the most
what I'm
senior
saying
person.
is, if we know that position driving to wherever outside the county, we know it has to happen all year. Are you saying we legally can't bid it at the beginning of the year?
Right.
This position
That's
for
what
the
we're
whole
talking
year?
about. That was when I say that's what you did for the ESY administrator. Yes, we've talked about doing the same thing for the bus drivers. Right now, the only ones we would feel comfortable with doing that are ESY for special ed. Now, I will say, even doing that, we've talked about we have to be conservative. 20 kids might qualify for ESY this year, and 30 kids might qualify next year. So we've been looking at like what would be a low ball number so that if you actually put it into somebody's contract. Now, of course, you could riff it the next year. We could riff it every year, depending on whether or not, and then put it back once we got our numbers.
Because they still have seniority to bid
They still
whatever
have their
they
summer
want.
seniority.
There's
Yes.
no guarantee those kids being bussed out of county will be
Right.
there next summer.
But I'm not understanding why, if there are employees, why it's an extra on getting their paychecks.
Are you talking
Like
about
if
their
they're
contract?
already in our system, if they're already in our system.
Why is it extra work to pay them during the summer? So, Miss Marone can respond.
We pay year-round employees on a contract. For summer, we have to have a list, and we automated it, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. But they used to fill out a timesheet, and we have to manually key everybody working in the summer. When you put somebody on a contract, like I put your name on, I tell the payroll system, pay Ms. Roper 240 days over a 24, paychecks. It just divides your check up by 24 and cuts that check. When it's a summer contract working for 20, 25 days, you have to tell me what teacher worked, how many hours they worked, whether they're getting a half day, full day, whether they're getting a $20 rate, $30 rate, and we manually key that data in for every summer position, which is why Dr. Gibson didn't mention transportation. For your Brookline, your Aurora, the ones that you know are 240 contracts, it would be much easier to put them on a 240 contract versus that bus driver ends and then the 40 days or 30 days that Cindy's running ESY, we get a timesheet in for one bus operator and an aide, how many hours they worked. If they didn't work, then they don't pay them, then we have to add a substitute and pay them manually. It's not just for finance, it's a lot of work for transportation, human resources. I mean, we're running almost year-round school without a year-round program to do it.
Right, but you said we are automated now, so is any of that automation helpful? Because we used to do this all by hand.
Well, it's a little it's a bit helpful. I would say Lee could speak to it. We've created spreadsheets.
The spreadsheet, I love the 4-digit spreadsheet, and I key all of that myself, and that's automatically uploaded, and that takes care of, and again, these are smaller programs, we're talking, 6, 7 teachers in all those programs I run, but you know, there are 10 of those programs with 7 people, so, but it is wonderfully automated.
Versus collecting timesheets, he just keys it into an Excel document. We are the only county in the state of West Virginia that's importing
I love it.
that data into WEOS.
Is it possible to pay those people at the end of the summer? Just one.
It would be wonderful. I think a lot of our employees, this is their second job. I won't
But if it's
speak on behalf of
advertised.
them. It's easy for us to pay them once. I don't know that it would be appreciated, but we could pay them once. Yeah, I
It's an
know.
idea, just
It's a great idea, I think.
if it's advertised that way, and
could.
they're still, if there are employees, they're still getting their, all 12 of their
I
checks.
mean, I would guess, Mr. Blanc, did they used to pay you once a month?
They-
Yes,
one time,
yeah,
they-
1970?
77.
I'm just asking.
87, they do
Yeah,
too, that's what I
yeah, it would be
But
lovely.
all of the transition programs and the clubs and the things and the elementary programs, all of those federal things, they are only reality getting.
Yeah, they're only maybe, some of
Because
them
it's
are
only a
3-day
2-week
programs or
deal,
2
yeah.
days.
One last question, do you know where the high school and middle school and these first 4 are gonna take place?
Where they're gonna take place?
Yeah, which high school, where, which middle school?
Jefferson and Charlestown would be the, I mean, Wildwood, I'm sorry, Jefferson and Wildwood, summer school.
And the
secondary.
special education extended school year
It's Drizzwood this year?
and English learners?
Drizzwood.
Drizzwood. Thank you.
Now, that says something to me as well, the summer school program for high school. If we do it at the high school, we obviously, what are we doing for gym since we don't have a track? It's gonna be able to be used for summer. Do we have another?
They'll have to use some of the field space up there.
Cause they won't be able to get on the field. Cause you can't cross the field. I mean, if you're gonna do the track, you don't want anybody touching it for.
Well, they won't be on it, I mean, obviously they won't be on the track, but there's a lot of open field space there, even in the band, you see them in.
Yeah, they'll just have to cross over the well.
And I'm not sure what we'll have as far as food that now with the integrated PE. I'm not
Yeah. Might
sure.
Yeah. I'm just thinking ahead, we might wanna kind of figure that out, or at least let them know, cause they will have to move kids across the street to Wildwood for that, cause they won't be able to, maybe not the whole summer, but depending on that schedule, we definitely do not want them walking on the track even
Yeah,
to
I'm
get
sure
to
they
the,
won't be able to do that.
to the field, and there's not a whole lot of that at Jefferson.
On a side note, one
Our
suggestion that was
teachers.
made to me was each principal at the high school, they buy new padlocks, because I understand everybody and their uncle have keys to the track. Once it's being worked on, get new padlocks, put those on the gates so people can't accidentally walk in there, whether it's the lawn crew or, you know, just somebody not knowing, and have, you know, very select people have those keys to prevent people from walking on there and doing damage before it's cured.
That's a great idea.
And then, my other question about this was, did we used to have a program at North Jefferson that's not happening this year? Do you know?
We had summer feed at North Jefferson. They moved the location around. I'm not sure.
We've had Energy Express sometime out there else,
We can't have it this year because of the construction, so we're actually doing an extended evening program for them at the end of May. We have a substitute program, but it's purely supplemental where the teachers are staying after an hour and a half with the children.
Is
It's
the
because of
construction on North Jefferson, or is it somewhere else?
Oh, no, Jefferson.
It's on
They'll be putting in the water line and
The
continue.
building, yeah.
So that the water line will then come into the building and we'll have, you know, water instead of have to use our well, which our well has it's difficult to mend up all the wells, any wells we have. They're all good wells, but they're still, you're running a public water plant. It's not easy.
Okay, so what you're looking for tonight is action on approval of this list of summer programs, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So do I have a motion to approve the list of summer programs for the summer?
So moved.
Second?
And the last question, these programs are for this coming summer, not for next year's budget?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? executive session, we have a student issue.
And the family's here, so.
Okay, and then, also some individual personnel issues, and we'll revisit the consent agenda and the other issues after we come back into open session, and also a quick legal update. So do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.